All right, I'm going to talk about two different things during this time. The first one is going to be on the query browser connectivity, and I'm going to run through a demo of that and show you things that I ran into when I was trying to use that connectivity, to show you the cool features and the challenges that I encountered along the way. And then also at the end I'll talk about InfoBurst and the new connectors that are available with that as well. All right, that has to do with Dashboards 4.0. All right, so to start off, to demo this, I have a dashboard that we used for our IBIS conference last year, and I thought it was a good one to use because it pretty much runs through a good general workflow. So I decided to take that dashboard and see what is it going to be like to create connectivity the way I had it here originally with the new query browser. And what is that going to be like? So to me it was like a good scenario of being able to have a similar workflow instead of just saying, okay, I see how this works, but to actually try and plug it in and see what kind of issues I ran into. So this dashboard, it doesn't have connectivity right now. I'm just going to show you real quick. It's got a summary page, a scorecard here on the front with cross-tabbed information, which is a common way we set up data. And then the lower chart looks at all 4 of those years by month, so we can compare January year over year and see how they're doing, things like that. And then the detail tab, this covers some other common functionality. So I'm going to have a list of my states here. Click on one of those states, view my product group summary, do a drill down from the pie chart to see data for monthly data for the revenue for that selected state and the selected product group. Okay? The lower part here where I had a list of sales reps, and we want to see their revenue for a particular, for the products that they're selling. I decided to change up this lower section just a little bit to show the functionality that they have now with this new query browser to take advantage of the query prompt selector, which is a new component that we can use with the query browser. Okay, so that's what it looks like, and we'll jump right in. So I'm going to open up the query browser here, which is another panel on your left-hand side. If you don't have it showing up here, you should be able to see it here from your view on your menu, which is probably hard to read, and query browser. Okay? So in the query browser, I'm going to click on Add Query. So, 2 big things here. My only 2 options for data sources are universes and BEX queries. And not only just universes, but universes created in the new 4.0 environment with the IDT. So it has to be a .unx universe and not a legacy .unv universe. Okay? So I'm going to choose universe there. And you'll see from my list here, even though I have other universes in this environment, only my UNX universes show up here. So it doesn't even give you the option to choose a UNV. So I'm going to choose this universe, which is a financial sales universe. And you'll see we have a query browser window here that it's similar to Query as a Web Service in how it looked. Looks actually more like Webby, I think, but has some additional cool features which I think you'll appreciate. So for this first scorecard here, I wanted to show my years, my order years, product group, and revenue. So I'm going to bring those in, product group, and order year. And for my measures, I'll select revenue. Scooch that up, and I'll click on next. So it runs that query and returns the results. So this is the data that I want, but I really want to be able to cross-tab that data. And there's no way to do that in this tool. So the first thing I realized when I looked at that is that I'm going to have to do some work in the universe in order to be able to get the data set up the way I want to present it in the dashboard. So I had to go back to the universe and create parameterized measures or dimensionalized measures. So I put them in a new folder here, which I called dashboard measures. So I'll expand that, and so I just modified my orders. That was actually the wrong measure. It should have been orders, but I parameterized or modified my orders measure and just added a where clause where order year equals 2007. Okay, so I have to drag in each one of those for each of the years that I want to display. So now when I run that, okay, now I have data for each of my 4 years there, but I don't really need the order year now. I would like that data consolidated, so I'm going to back up and remove order year. And that's going to give me the results that I want. Okay? So I'm going to click on next. And here's my refresh options, or load options, better said. So do I want it to load as soon as I open up the dashboard, or do I want it to load based on a trigger? In this case, I want it to load on open, so we'll leave that option selected there and say OK. So the other interesting innovation that they added with this query browser is that we can now connect the components directly to that query instead of plotting that data in Excel like we've had to do for all our other connectivity options. So what I'm going to do is select that scorecard, and for the display data, instead of pointing to the Excel spreadsheet, I'm going to use the drop down here, and let me scoot this over just a little. Can you see that over there where I can either point to the spreadsheet or request query data? So I'm going to request the query data, and we have our one query there. Unfortunately, I can't just say give me all of the objects. I have to actually check the box next to each one of those columns and say I want each one of those. So I'll say OK. All right, and you'll see it displays right away in my scorecard, which I really like, so I can tell whether how the formatting looks, how the presentation is going to be. I'll go ahead and preview this real quick just so you can see that it's going to pull the data there. And there's my first connector. All right. I'm not going to take the time to format the scorecard right now to get the numbers left aligned and things like that, which I would normally, but due to time, I'll leave that for now. Whoops, and come out of preview. All right, so I'm ready to set up my next chart. I want to bring in my years again, and I need the monthly data. So again, I had to go back to my universe and make measures for revenue for each one of the years that I wanted to represent. Okay, so I'm going to add a new query here, but before I do, I'm going to show you. All right, I'm going to start adding a bunch of queries here. Instead of just calling them query 1 and query 2, I can give it a name. So I'll edit this first query that I built and show you where to name that, because it's not really obvious. It's this third little icon there. It says query properties, and I can click on that and then give it a name. So I'll call this order summary by year, by years, okay? All right. Then I actually have to go through each one of these screens and say, okay, in order for that change to take effect. And now if I come back here, you'll see that it has the name that I gave it up there. All right, I'm going to add my next query from a universe, from my financial sales, IDT universe. All right, so for this one, I need my order months. And from my dashboard measures, I'll bring in the revenue objects that have been parameterized. Okay, so let's click next and see how that looks. All right, I don't know how well you can see that, but this presented my next challenge. My order months are not coming in the order that I want. It says February, June, August. So I'm going to go back, and this is one of the cool options I have here. I can add a sort. Not only can I add a sort, but I can add a sort on an object that isn't part of my query. So I'm going to insert an object, and fortunately my universe has an order month number. So I'll say okay. I want an ascending sort. Okay. And then I'll click next. And voila, I have January, February, March, April, just the way I want. Yeah, so I really like that. I was excited for that feature. So I'll click next. This query I also want to load on open, so I'll say okay. And I'll quickly grab my column chart and start binding that to the query itself. All right. So again, I have to bind each one of the series individually. And it doesn't pick up the series name. So I have to actually, even though that says 2008 here, it's actually 2007 data, which I have to manually put in there. So it's not dynamic. So that's something that you're going to have to be aware of. It's not going to dynamically pick up your series names, and you're going to have to make those adjustments when you change years. Okay? So I can bind the next series. And okay. And it's going to be 2009. And the last one, whoops, make sure you select the right query, otherwise you're going to get funky data. And for my order months along the bottom, right now you'll see they say Jan, Feb, which it's picking up from my spreadsheet here, so hard-coded values. If I click there, now you'll see the long month name, which is what it's getting from the database. All right, that's good to go. I think we can preview that now. Okay, so we're done with our summary tab. I'll move on to the detail. The two things I learned on this tab were that I have to make parameterized measures if I want to cross-tab the data for using the presentation the way we're accustomed to in Excelsius, and we have a new sort feature. All right, so I'm going to hide those two objects and unhide my detail tab. Now, for this part, originally I started by creating a distinct list for my states, but I realized I didn't have to do that now. Now I can create a query that brings in my state and my product group and the revenue, and then I can plot the state information into the spreadsheet and use that as my selector. All right? So I'll show you how I did that. I'll minimize that and that. Create a new query. All right, so for this one I need customer state and product group and revenue, but I only want current year revenue, so current meaning 2010. All right, but I want it based on a prompt. So I'm going to bring customer state down here into my prompt area, and I'm going to say equal to prompt. Very similar to how we do that in Webby, right? We have very similar options here as you would in Web Intelligence, and I'm going to leave the default options there and just say OK. And click on Next. All right, and I can choose a state here. I'll pick Arizona and run that. And there's my product group revenue for Arizona. Okay. And now this time I don't want it to be refresh on load because I need it to grab a value from the dashboard. So I'm going to base it on a trigger. The trigger cell I have set up already on my detail tab, this yellow cell for state. But I have to bind the prompt to go there. Okay. So I'm going to say OK here. My trigger's ready. I'm going to go back to my query browser now, and I'm going to select this prompt here. When I click on that, I can have options here. So I'm going to click on customer state, and I'm going to connect to the spreadsheet. So here the first option is selected values and then insert list of values. So I'm going to insert the list of values into the space I had prepared for my list box there, for my list of states. And then the selected value, I'm going to point to this yellow cell. All right? So I will point that right there and set up my list of values to come right here. I also discovered that it does not bring a header cell. So, all right. So it's going to insert the cells in there, and I think we're good there. I'm ready to set up my pie chart now to be bound to that query. So the values I want to get from this last query from my revenue, and the labels are going to be the product group. Okay, I think we're ready. Let's preview and see if we have a state list that's going to be filled in there. Yay! All right, so I have my state list here. Another thing that I found here was, and you can't see it now because I fixed it in the universe, this list of values is coming from the universe, and it was not sorting the way I wanted it to. And even though in the query browser, in that first window in my select objects, I had put a sort on there, it still was not sorting them because this is coming from the prompt and not from the query results. So I had to go back to my universe and add a custom list of values to my universe and export it again. And then I have the right order for objects. The other thing I noticed, which is going to be a little bit harder to fix, I haven't fixed it yet here, you'll see. So there's Arizona, there's California, and you'll see my pie chart is changing for that. But then Connecticut, okay, Delaware, I have no data for Delaware. So ordinarily, I would want to only have values in that state list that actually had revenue. And even though I put in my query browser, only give me this where revenue is greater than 0, it has no effect on this list of values. So you would have to go back to your universe and probably create a duplicate object and create a join to your revenue table and how that's derived so that you could get distinct values here. So that could be problematic in the future. Okay? All right, this next chart, it's going to have 2 prompts. I want for a selected state and a product group, show me the revenue. The target in the example that I had built before for IBIS, we brought the target information from an Excel spreadsheet. That's not an option with Query Browser, so we won't be able to have target information. I'll create this next query real quick. All right, for that one we need our order months, and I'll put a sort on them real quick before I forget. Order date, order months, not that. Order month number. Okay. And then we want our 2010 revenue from our dashboard measures. And then for the filters, I'm going to add 2 filters, one for customer state and one for product group. Both of these will be based on a prompt, and I'll keep the default options again. On one of these, I said don't retain the list of values, and it caused problems in my dashboard. So I haven't figured out a way around that yet if you didn't want to retain that. So I'll select Arizona and peripheral, run, and we've got our data. Excellent. So now the trick here is I need to bind those to where we're getting data from the other 2. So my query trigger here is going to be the combination of state and product group this time. So it's just my formula, which you can't read here at all, says equals H2 and H3. So the combination, anytime either one of those changes, it will trigger a refresh of this query. All right. Now on the chart itself, I'm going to bind the revenue to my query data and the categories to my product group list, or order month, sorry. All right, last thing is on this query 3, I will bind, make sure this order state, this time I'm just going to say look for the selected value in H3 where my state is going to go, and the product group is going to get the selected values from here. My drill on my pie chart is putting that selected object in H3 still. Okay, so that's what's supplying that value. All right, looks good. I'll preview real quick and we'll move on to the lower one. All right, Arizona, there we go. Okay, so it is changing dynamically whenever I change my state and whenever I drill on the product group. Okay, now this lower one. I'll show you the two different ways. I'm going to change it so that I have a prompt selector that's going to give me a list of products. So I want to be able to choose more than one product at a time for a particular sales rep. Originally I had them both to be where you could select more than one sales rep. You'll see in a moment the boxes are kind of big. So I changed it just to not so you can only select one sales rep and multiple products. All right, so I'm going to delete the radio button that I have on there now, and I'm going to add components on here. If you can't read it, but there's a new folder on there called Universe Connectivity, and then in there you have two objects: query refresh button, which would be a button where you could trigger your query if they press on it, and then the other one says query prompt selector. So that's what I'm going to add. I'll add two of those to my dashboard. Okay, and I'm going to set up my query real quick. The other thing I found when I was working on this presentation is that the timeout issue there's a timeout for this, and I've kind of been surprised that I haven't run into it yet, because it doesn't seem to be 20 minutes. It seems to be shorter than that, where I'd be working in here testing stuff out, and then I'd go to preview something and I'd get a connection error. It says authentication failed or something like that. So I'd have to, yeah, well, I am moving along, aren't I? All right, so for this one, I need my salesperson and my products. Let's see, I don't need that there. I need the salesperson in my prompt. Salesperson here. And I'm also going to show you that I can use a predefined filter in here as well. So I'm going to use a combination of a prompt that I create myself and a predefined filter. In my results, I'm going to show, what am I showing there? Revenue and product name. All right. I think that's good. All right. No, I forgot to ask for a prompt here. Okay. So I'll select my sales rep and a product, which I'll say there, and run. Okay, and that's my one value. Again, I'm going to base it on a trigger, and the trigger is going to be, I'll just point it to that cell. Actually, no. The trigger is going to be based on the query prompts themselves, okay? So, no trigger set up here. I'm done with that. I'll say okay. So, the first query prompt here. Over in the properties now, it says source prompt. I'm going to use the drop down there and select for my query for and say enter salesperson. That's the sales rep prompt that I want. Now you see it changed here. I have the little drop down and it has this apply there. So this is the trigger part that I was talking about. So down here I have two options. Right now the default one says refresh on button click. So when I click that button that says apply, it will refresh the query. And I can change the name of that wording if I don't want it to say apply. In this case though, I wanted to change any time someone changes the sales rep. So I'm going to change it to refresh when selection changes. Okay? Now the second one, this is the one where I want to be able to choose more than one product to display. So my source product is this, my source prompt is this predefined filter here. And let me move this down so you can see it better. Okay, it's kind of a long box, and which can be good and can be bad. You can also only collapse it so far. So I can, that's the smallest I can make it, which fits in here pretty good. So I'll leave it that, make it just a little bit bigger maybe so we can see some more values. All right. And this one, I will leave this option on here for apply. Just so you can see, I can select, you know, 2 or 3 products and then hit apply and it refreshes my query. All right, so now I'm ready to go except for the chart. Let's, combination chart. Revenue is gonna come from my query. Target we don't have. Category labels is my product name. Okay, let's preview. Here's a timeout issue. And I'll show you what I was finding out, that I can go ahead and log in here and then I still get errors. So what I found, oh, and I didn't add dynamic visibility either. What I found is that I would still get those errors. So I just come out of preview and go over here and I refreshed one of the queries. If you right click on it, you see refresh. And you can't read it, but you have a refresh and a refresh all. I don't want to ever refresh all because that's going to take way too long. So just refresh that one query and it will prompt me for my login. So I'll do that. Okay, let me add dynamic visibility real quick on these 2. Show up on my control tab. And that is a 2. All right. I would have thought that every time you preview the dashboard that that's running the queries and it should refresh your session, but apparently not. This is not a good sign. In my testing, the longer I left, it just stayed there and it doesn't produce an error. I have Fiddler open and I was checking in there and it just doesn't produce an error. Let me try refreshing again and see if that fixes it. It seemed to have to do though with those query prompt selectors, and the way I had to fix it in the past was delete them and re-add them, so we'll see. Okay, let me pull these off real quick. Forgot dynamic visibility again, but let's just see. All right, I'm gonna switch over to detail just so I can show you these real quick. So I can select my sales rep and then select multiple objects here and click apply, and it displays those. I have some nice options here. This deselects all. The first one selects all, and I can apply that. I can show all or show selected. Let me clear that, and so if I just have those two, and you see again it's pulling, even though I had, here I have 3 objects selected here, but only 2 showing up in the chart. Again, that's because in the universe, it's pulling that list of values from the universe and not from the query, okay? So that's why we're seeing that, and the same for this list of values for the sales reps. I really only have 4 sales reps that have revenue, and yet you see this long list here. So that would be a change that you'd have to make there. All right. Then the rest of this dashboard we can't finish filling out. We can't do write back with Query Browser. We can't do save as Excel with Query Browser. Okay. So I have one little slide that talked about the data foundation a little bit that I wanted to mention before we go on to the info burst. All right, so it does use a web service, the same DSWS Bob J call to the Business Objects Java application server. And so just be aware of that. Multiple calls to that. When you have a lot of connections, it's going to slow down performance. The reason why that's important is because of the second point, is that there's no aggregation engine associated with it. So I can't pull in year and month data and then use that same query to pull out year and have it aggregate the total for the year. It does not have that capability. So I have to create 2 separate queries, one for year and one for months, in order to see that. So therefore I have to add multiple connections. It's going to make multiple calls to the server, and it's going to potentially slow things down. It also does not utilize the cached query data or the Excelsius cache server. So you're making a live hit to the database every time. And if the database performance is slow, your dashboard will be slow. It's a live hit to your production environment. Very similar to query as a web service. So it's got some cool stuff, but there's still some underlying issues that our customers are facing. We have a customer in California right now who's using this as their main connectivity option, and they have 20+ connectors right now, and it's still in their dev environment, and it's very slow. They're hoping that the production server is more robust and will be able to handle that hit, but right now in development they've got a lot of people hitting that dev environment, and so the behavior is slow. So, things to be aware of there.
That's really interesting, Roxanne, because just the fact that there's no aggregation engine, the fact that it's not using the cache that is part of the function that exists within the product today, would almost suggest that this is very much a first release, and there's more to come, because it doesn't make a lot of sense, especially the aggregation engine, because you can do that. Any query, web query, and so forth. So why wouldn't they have done it in this?
That's what we're hoping. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's not there yet. All right. So the other thing I wanted to show you was to talk about InfoBurst connectivity with Dashboards 4.0. I'm going to close that. And I'm going to open up InfoBurst and give everybody a sneak peek at what the new build looks like. This is the new UI. All right. The layout here will look very similar to you, but some of the objects have gotten a little bit of a facelift. This is the new symbol for XDC cache query. And if I open that up, you'll see a change in the layout here. This is something that I'm really excited about because I spent a lot of time developing in here, and they made some improvements to the UI that will make my life easier as a developer. One is you'll see we have a much longer list here to be able to show our data sources. And then just above that, well, let me hover over this. Now I can tell where that data source came from, which is very cool. I can tell that it's in this folder, this report, and it even tells me the report tab because that particular one came from a web intelligence report. So it tells me the name of the report and the tab of the report that that came from. So I can look at these by data source or source object. So if I click on source object, I can see that I'm using a web intelligence report 3 times. I'm using a database connection and an Excel spreadsheet. So it's very nice that they gave us that option. The other cool thing is that if I add a new data source, it automatically picks up the name of the tab that I'm working on. So if I want to name the tab of my web intelligence report to match the name of the chart, it will automatically pick that up and I won't have to spend time renaming that. So I love that feature. It called it Summary 1 because I already have an object in here called Summary, but I love that new feature. Then we can finish setting up our cache queries. Nothing really changed on that tab. So I'm really excited about those few changes that will make my life easier. The other change they made was in the connectors themselves. So when Business Objects came out with Dashboards 4.0, and at least with Pack 3, I believe it was, they made underlying change to the architecture of the software, and they made some changes that were very long overdue. They had been using Flex 2, which has been old for a really long time, and they finally have upgraded. Now they're using Flex 4, and Flex 4 is what will do the compilation of the Flash object that creates the Shockwave Flash file for you. So that is a great upgrade that they made with this release of Dashboards, and we're very happy that they've made that release. However, since they changed the SDK, any company that was creating components, any third-party company that was creating components for Excelsius is going to have to change their architecture as well to match that Flex 4. Okay? So as well for us, the connectors that we use in building dashboards with Infoburst to be able to take advantage of all that caching of our data and being able to query that cache as well, we had to take advantage of that change in the Flex 4 and make our components compatible with that. So we have done that. For the most part, you won't see any difference. When you upgrade to Dashboards 4.0, you will have to use the new connectors if you want to develop in Flash in Dashboards 4.0 and with the new UI with build 121, which is just now in a release candidate. Okay, it will be in general release later on this month. So I'll show you real quick a dashboard. There's not much change there, but there is one neat change that I'm excited about. All right. when you add connectors to Excelsius, if anyone's had to add the InfoBurst connectors, you know how you have to add them one at a time. Now you can add them all at once as a group. So you just import the folder one time and you've got all the connectors and the latest ones. So I liked that. And then the other very cool change is with the cache query connector itself. And that is that I can reference more than one cache query from a single connector. So I can load that connector one time and it's going to load 2 different queries into 2 different spots on my dashboard based on a single trigger. Okay? I'm really excited about that. It's going to reduce the number of connections that you have to make. And again, make my life easier, which is always a good thing.
That'd be multiple, it's not limited to 2.
Yes, that's unlimited. You can add as many cache queries you want. The key thing to remember is that it will have one trigger, okay? So everything that you want to trigger on at the same time, you can put in there and add as many cache queries as you want, okay? So the SDK changes affected the cache connector, which is this first one, and the cache query connector. So any upgrades, if you upgrade your InfoBurst connected dashboard to Dashboards 4.0 and the new connectors, you will have to delete and recreate your cache connectors and cache query connectors. All right, the others will maintain their connectivity. Everything else, the write back works the same. The save to Excel works the same. So, exciting times. And that's all I had. Any questions?
Is the write back from the InfoBurst, or is that a component, or is it?
The write back is a connector in InfoBurst. It's part of InfoBurst. So it's a connector that we set up to write back to a database table.
And it plugs into the
Yes.
Timeout.
Yes. And this dashboard has that set up in it here, which I can demo really quick. So I want to add targets here. Let's see. All right, that guy already has targets. Actually, I'll just pick a different month for April here. He doesn't have any targets. I'll add, let's see, we'll make it 25,000, 40,000, and what? I think I'm a long way off from his last one. He's got to sell a lot. I'll click update, and right away it went back, wrote to the database, and returned the live values there. So, yeah, and when we go offline and come back, those are still stored in the database. Okay, any other questions?
You mentioned the shortcomings in the query browser and connectivity about, no aggregation and about numbers of connections. Obviously, you wouldn't have that issue.
No, you wouldn't. This has the caching, and it's actually, we expect increased performance because of the new Flex 4 SDK that's underlying that. The way it compiles things, we expect even better performance than we've had before. So, okay.
Okay, if there's no other questions. Thank you very much, Roxanne.
One question. So the InfoBurst, the new version, is it compatible with, or does it take documents from V1 as well?
Okay. The new, I gotta make sure I say this right. Build 121 can still connect to Excelsius 2008 dashboards and the old connectors. If you want to use Dashboards 4.0 and upgrade your dashboards, then you will have to update your connectors. Okay?
Can you use the new connectors in Excelsius 2008?
No. Because of that Flex, the Flex 4 Yep. Yes.
What's the upgrade path of moving from XSL 2008 to the new dashboard? Is it difficult? I mean, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, what's your connectivity?
Well, currently we use Live Office, but we are starting to look more into the info side. So
Okay.
we moved from like 2008 into this whole new 4.0. What's been your experience like?
It's going to be, because of that SDK change, you're probably just going to have to redo your connections, which might be major, might be minor, depending on the complexity of your dashboard.
But you raise an excellent question, because Dashboards 4 was really designed with the query browser to fit with BI 4.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
what you're seeing happening within the world of SAP Business Objects is that SAP will turn around and say, oh, use the query browser, right? And you're going to see Live Office and Quaz disappear.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make any sense anymore in BI4 to use those kind of connectors. So your question is excellent, because you're going to need to make a decision. If you've got connected Excelsius 2008 dashboards, when you go to BI4, what are you going to do? You can use Infobus, yes, you can use Query Browser, but you really want to be looking to use one of those. Okay, all right, well, thank you again, Roxanne.